Okay, it looks like we're waiting for a few people to filter in yet, so we'll get started in just a moment. Amanda, are we ready on your end?
We are good on eScribe and YouTube now, so ready to roll when you are.
Thanks. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call the Land Use and Planning Committee to order. Members are filtering back in, so we'll wait till we have a quorum to start with our interviews. But this is, of course, a virtual Zoom webinar committee meeting. We will have the entirety of our meeting today with interviews for members of the Historic Preservation Commission. So I don't anticipate a lot of public participation outside of our applicants, but as always, members of the public can join the Zoom meeting at ci.missoula.mp.us/webcasts. And once you're in the Zoom meeting, you can make public comment by using the hand raise function. If you're calling in by phone, you can press *9 on your phone and I'll recognize you. So our first item is, and we have instructions up on the screen. You can also call and leave a voicemail at 552-6012. We have, so we can go ahead and get started with our business. Our first item is roll call. Amanda, can you call the roll for us, please?
Stacy Anderson. Mirta Becerra.
Present.
John Contos.
Here.
Heather Harp. Absent. Jordan Hess.
Present.
Gwen Jones.
Present.
Julie Merritt.
Present.
Jesse Ramos.
Present.
Amber Sherrill.
Present.
Sandra Vasica.
Present.
Brian Van Losberg.
Present.
Heidi West. Absent.
Okay, great. So we have minutes from December 2nd. Without objection, those will stand approved. Okay, seeing none. And now would be an opportunity for public comment on items not listed elsewhere on the agenda. And I'll just note for the record that we don't have any members of the public here for that. So we can move right into our committee business. This is our annual appointment process for members of the Historic Preservation Commission. We're really pleased to have a slate of highly qualified applicants this time around. We have the schedule posted on the agenda. So, and we're scheduled to start right away here with Jamie Lockman. So I'm gonna get started right away with Jamie. And Jamie, just so you know, we have a list of about 9 questions here. We have about 15 minutes just for time management. And I'll just get us started with the first one. If you don't mind just introducing yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us any, we've got a little bit of background noise here.
We weren't getting sound through the website.
I think, okay, there we go. So Jamie, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what useful knowledge, experience, or perspective you would bring to the commission.
Well, my name is Jamie Lockman. I grew up here in Missoula. My parents still live in the same house I grew up in up on 56th Street. I live in the Lewis and Clark neighborhood and have for almost 20 years. I did leave Missoula for a short, well, 9 years. Seems like a short time now. To join my husband on our farm in eastern Montana. We maintain ownership of our farm, but are not actively farming. Now I'm the executive director for the Montana Organic Association. I first became involved with the Historic Preservation Commission when I worked at HRA as a research archaeologist. I was the liaison between the Missoula Redevelopment Agency and the HPC. Life and work intervened and I left the HPC and then had the opportunity to come back a couple of years ago, in part having to do with the Lalonde Ranch and Moon Randolph and just my mutual interests in historic preservation and actually agriculture as well. So I've sat as the chair for the last year of the HPC. Originally my application was to switch positions because I was an alternate and to go to an at-large in part because of my role as chair. So that was last year. I never did get the interview, and so here I am.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good opportunity to kind of give everyone a little background. We were starting to schedule interviews kind of right at the beginning of March, and of course that all got put off with the stay-at-home order and everything coming, and so it wasn't communicated particularly well, but we basically extended the terms of everyone that was on the board and allowed them to continue to serve. But the HPC has been down membership, and so this is a really important, I know that's been a little bit of a frustration for staff and for the board, and so this is our opportunity to correct that, and thanks for bearing with us with that. So second question is, what is the purpose of historic preservation? How can the Historic Preservation Commission contribute to our city?
Well, there are multiple views of historic preservation, and certainly it's worth preserving those buildings that are important to our community for various reasons and matching the Section 106 criteria. Although not necessarily. Missoula has established its own record of historically significant buildings. That's something I was very impressed that Emmy Shear took on doing. One of the projects I was involved in this last year was recognizing racially restrictive language in covenants, particularly homeowners associations. And through working with Jim Nugent's office and ultimately contacting Tyler Gannett, realized that this was more of a county issue than a city issue, and certainly continuing to shed light on that issue to address it and not hide it.
Great, thank you. How do you see the relationship between historic preservation and economic development?
There are plenty of economic studies that show that historic preservation is a boon, especially for small businesses. Buildings are reused. Oftentimes rents are a little less, but it adds to the character of a community. Certainly our buildings downtown that are historic lend a great bit of character to Missoula, and it's exciting to see the renovations that are happening, particularly on Main Street, and just really excited to see how that's going to add to the whole ambiance of downtown.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your understanding of the role of the National Register of Historic Places? Excuse me, what is your understanding of the role that the National Register of Historic Places plays at the local level? Is it adequate, and what role should it play?
Certainly it's adequate. I would say, certainly the buildings have to meet the criteria, and you have to go through the process of nomination and research and all of that. I don't have a problem with it at all. And like I said, I do appreciate that we've established our own list of community important buildings. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And maybe a follow-up to that, I guess, do you believe, I guess, should the National Register, should we have more teeth in our local regulations with nationally listed buildings?
I think what we have right now is sufficient. I think the focus should be revisiting our historic preservation plan that hasn't been updated since 1990. And so that's where the work should be. And through that, if something is identified, but as is, things work.
Okay, great, thanks. Next question, do you have any recommendations about Missoula's historic preservation ordinance? Do you have any suggestions regarding the duties, responsibilities, or structure of the commission itself?
No, I mean, it's been a great bunch of people, some real talent, and people who love the community and who are very concerned. I think there's a good balance of being very concerned and very practical at the same time. So yeah, I have no problems with it. We'll have to replace our historic preservation officer. And Emmy has done a great job and really moved the historic preservation office forward. And I just hope we can continue building on her work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually going to insert a question for all for all applicants, and I wonder if you could just speak to that vacancy and what you believe are important qualities as the city looks to fill the large shoes that Emmy leaves behind.
So what characteristics and qualities?
Yeah.
Well, certainly expertise in the National Register in Section 106 and knowledge of Montana history and Missoula history, and particularly how Missoula developed. And some of the wins and struggles with historic preservation, I think too, that person should be well known. I mean, I'll just lay it out there. The MERC project caused a lot of hard feelings and division within the historic preservation community. And, that needs to be acknowledged. I think we have moved on from that. And, but I think it's always good to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I would like to see, some bridges built with the folks that, really, there are still a lot of hard feelings. So,
yeah. Okay, thanks. The Historic Preservation Commission has two functions which can seem at odds with one another at times. On one hand, the commission promotes Missoula's historic resources and advocates for historic preservation. On the other hand, the commission must objectively review demolition and development permit requests. And the MERC's a great example. And can you describe this tension and how do you approach these objectives?
I mean, fortunately, we haven't had too many contentious issues since I served right before the MERC and came on a couple, not too long after. And so somehow I avoided all that. But, I think maybe the issue that we spent a lot of time on was the painted sign for the ZAC on Main Street. And I think we were able to work not only with ZAC, but also with, sorry, I'm going to get the committee that's in charge of that, but the sign, whatever group is in charge of signage, and actually they were more strict than we were. So, I believe in the process, and I think you can find middle ground.
Okay. Great, thanks. And then the last three are really kind of, or the next two, I guess, are kind of more logistics. The HPC meets the first Thursday of the month at 6 p.m.
No, we don't.
And does that generally work for your schedule? And do you have time to review staff reports and other materials?
It works much better for my schedule, and we have not been meeting at that time. So
Oh, okay. What time are you meeting?
we've been meeting on Wednesdays at 6, I think.
Perfect. I will update that here. The city offers board training twice a year. This training covers good governance, open meetings, public participation and right to know, ethics, conflicts of interest, bylaws, minutes, and parliamentary procedures. The city council feels it's important that all city board members attend this training. Have you attended, or would you be willing to attend the training next?
I have attended the training, yes.
Okay, great.
And found it valuable.
Great. Okay. Well, again, thank you for your interest. Is there any, and for your past and ongoing service. Is there anything else that you'd like us that you'd like to add about your interest in the Historic Preservation Commission that we didn't ask?
It's been a very enriching experience for me, and especially to return back to it. And I think working towards, it's my understanding that as chair, I may be assuming I'm still chair, would be involved in the hiring process somewhat for the new historic preservation officer. I think moving the historic preservation plan forward is really important, given that it hasn't been addressed in 30 years. And certainly things have changed in those 30 years. And so I think too, just looking at some new projects, I know Missoula is going to continue to grow and develop, particularly downtown, once we get past this weird time. So I've enjoyed serving. Thank you for the interview, and thank you for interviewing the fine slate that you have also listed.
Great. Thanks again. And just for your information for process, we're going to interview several other people today, and then we'll look to fill as many positions as possible at our next regular city council meeting, which is next Monday. We will still have at least one vacancy, and so we'll end up re-advertising again for that. But we'll try to get you as full of a slate as possible for the start of the year. So.
Okay.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you much, everyone. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Okay, it looks like our next interviewee is not here yet, so we can. It's James McDonald, and he's scheduled in a couple minutes here. So, Sandra.
How many applicants do we have versus how many spots are we filling?
We have 5 applicants and 6 spots.
Oh, okay, thanks.
We can recess until our next applicant arrives, but I ask that everyone stay close by, and we'll get started again as soon as he's here. Oh, and also just for the record, Heidi West joined us a couple minutes after the start of the meeting. Okay, we can come back into order. All right, our next, we'll be back in order here. Our next applicant is Jim McDonald. Jim, you should be able to unmute yourself and turn your video on. Let me know if you have any technical problems.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Because the last meeting I was in, they couldn't get the audio to work, so with the HPC commission. So,
Oh, okay.
so it works good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us today, and thanks for your service on the commission and for your continued interest. We have a pretty informal interview, as informal as we can be on a Zoom call, but we are interviewing 5 applicants today, and we'll be making appointments at our next regularly scheduled meeting. As you know, as having served on the HPC, we've been operating with kind of a reduced commission size for a while now, and so we're looking forward to filling those vacancies, and again appreciate your continued service. So I'll just run through our questions, and then we'll try to keep it as conversational as we can, and feel free to jump in. So first, please just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what useful experience, knowledge, or perspective you bring to the Historic Preservation Commission.
All right, thank you. Well, I've been an architect in Missoula here since 1974. Or excuse me, 1971 when I was at the university, but started my own business in 1974. And all of my work has been preservation consulting for projects that are not only in Missoula and Montana, but all over the western parts of the United States. So a lot of Park Service work, a lot of GSA work, federal work, and then even private projects throughout the western half of the United States. I'm licensed in several states, but as a firm, we're licensed in many states in the western part of the United States. Anyway, preservation's been my whole experience. Still involved after over 40 years in business and 36 years on the HPC, which is kind of interesting, from the day it was first started. And working on projects that throughout Missoula here, like I mentioned, we're working on the GSA building now for the city and county, and I'm part of that team. And then a lot of other projects at the university and Forest Service and several private ones that have come about here. So many years of experience as an architect doing preservation work, and then also on boards. I'm on the AIA Historic Resource Committee at the national level. I'm also a board member of the Montana Preservation Alliance, now Preserve Montana, as well as being on the commission here. So that's a lot of great experience over the years.
Great, thanks, Jim. Question number 2 is, what is the purpose of historic preservation, and how can the Historic Preservation Commission contribute to our city?
The commission, of course, is an advisory group, but mostly promoting historic preservation and helping out anyone who's interested in being involved in preservation, and especially with buildings and things like that. I think what has happened over the last few years here with Emmy, she's put together some good ordinances and also some guidelines and principles for preservation that we can, as preservation commissioners, can help different individuals as they work through their projects. We'd like to see as much of the historic buildings that are still available around here to be adapted for new uses. And we can do that, provide professional guidance. As an architect, I can provide professional guidance to those persons, as well as history and things like tax credits and those different elements that are part of preservation. So The commission, again, is advisory. We can't make final decisions. That's up to the city council, of course, but we can give a lot of good direction to people interested in preserving their buildings.
Great, thanks. What do you see as the relationship between historic preservation and economic development?
Well, I think it's really important. It was interesting during the period of 2008 to 2012 when a lot of new construction wasn't things weren't being developed in new construction. We were doing a lot of work with existing buildings. People were adapting them for new uses and also providing a lot of good projects that they could do, and we helped them out a lot. And we still see that as part of it. In the downtown here, just the building, like the building across the street, the old Radio Central building being redeveloped now, that's going to help a lot with also the new construction that's being worked on downtown here. So we see preservation as a very important part. Also from a sustainability standpoint, reusing an old building is really the greenest building, because it's a part of sustainability where we're cutting down on having to provide new materials and reusing the buildings as we continue with sustainability. So preservation is really important from an economic standpoint and also from a sustainability standpoint.
Great, thank you. What is your understanding of the role the National Register of Historic Places plays on the local level? Is this adequate, and what role should it play?
Well, it's we have, I think, 60 some significant buildings that come under the ordinance here that we can provide input to, but we also have several historic districts where contributing buildings that under the new permit application process and things like that, we can help out all sorts of the neighborhoods or different areas. So National Register is pretty important. It's really important from a standpoint as an architect. We can do adaptive reuse using the International Building Code for existing buildings, which allows for historic exceptions and things like that, separate from the building codes, main building codes. And then also we can provide tax act information if people want to get the federal tax credit as well as the Montana tax credit. So.
Okay, thanks. Do you have any suggestions about Missoula's historic preservation ordinance? Do you have any suggestions regarding the duties, responsibilities, or structure of the commission itself?
Well, I think, since the mercantile, and then with Emmy Shear coming in and working with her and the planning or development services, we've been able to go in and I clarify, I guess, more of the ordinances and things like that. So it's really working very well right now, I think. What I really want to see, though, is more educational sort of information getting out to people who have historic buildings. There's still people out there that say, well, if we have a historic building, we're going to have to go through so many hoops, we're not going to be able to develop it. So it's easier to tear it down and build a new one. But there are a lot of things that can be done. We need to do some of that education and continue to educate not only the city and county governments that we get involved with, but also with individuals and different organizations, as well as private developers that have historic buildings and want to do some. So I think that's the important part, is continue more of that education, and with the new ordinances and the different guidelines and the heritage interpretation plan and things like that, I think those are going very well and doing things that really help out preservation.
Great, thank you. Actually, regarding Emmy's departure, is there anything that you would recommend as the city looks to fill that position in terms of changes to the role description, or changes to the duties of the position, or any characteristics to look for in a successful historic preservation officer?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was on the committee for the interviews of this last time, and we picked Emmy because of her experience and knowledge. I think it's going very well. I hope we can get another person like her. I had to write a review for her for the place in Bellingham, which was unfortunate, but I felt I had to do that. I couldn't just say no. She hasn't done very well here, so she needs to stay here, you know. So, but I had to give her a good review. But really, I think what was put together after or at that time when we were able to hire her, or you were able to hire her, not me, but we had a pretty good process that we went through. We had a lot of good applicants, and we were able to pick someone that can do a great job. I think the important thing is probably to have a little more money put into the program. We seem to be a little short on funds under that part of the program to do additional things beyond just the normal planning and ordinance elements. So I think it'd be more if we could get some additional funds, not a lot, we're not talking about big funds at all, but funds that could be able to provide more education in the community.
Great. Okay, thank you. Next, the Historic Preservation Commission has two functions which can seem at odds with one another. On one hand, the commission promotes Missoula's historic resources and advocates for historic preservation. On the other hand, the commission must objectively review demolition and development permit requests. Can you describe this tension and how do you approach these objectives?
Well, I think now that we have the new ordinances, it gives a little more direction to the applicant of what we can do and also what we can do to help them out. Yes, there is conflict there, but we also hopefully can provide good information to an applicant for demolition to see if there's other ways of doing it rather than tearing down the building. We have a lot of different resources now that we can use to help it out. And then of course, people that want to go ahead with historic preservation, we can help them out also. I don't see it as a real conflict. I think it's just people understanding more what this means and what their opportunities are in order to save a building. Before, it seemed to be the old ordinance didn't seem to give that much clarification, and so people were kind of just, you know, wandering around not knowing exactly what they could do or what possibilities they have in order to keep a building on the as a historic building and adapt it or whatever they might want to do with it.
Okay, great. As you know, the HPC meets on the first Wednesday of each month at 6 p.m. Does this schedule generally accommodate this meeting time and allow time for give time to review staff reports and be prepared for the meetings?
Oh, is it Wednesday? It was Wednesday for a while, but it's going back to Thursday, right?
I guess I'm unclear on that. So I'll defer to you on that.
Yeah, it was Wednesday just for a couple months because of another conflict in the chambers there, but I think that's over. So we're back to Thursday at 6 o'clock, and that works fine.
Okay.
The agenda comes out the Friday before. All the information is usually in the agenda. We're able to review things, and even Emmy provided stuff earlier than maybe even the agenda so that we could review stuff ahead of time. But it's very adequate to get that information on that Friday before, and then also review it and be able to respond at the meeting on Thursday.
Okay, great. The city offers board training twice a year. This training covers good governance, open meetings, public participation and right to know, ethics, conflicts of interest, bylaws, minutes, and parliamentary procedures. The city council feels it's important that all city board members attend this training. Have you attended it in the past, or would you be willing to attend it in the future?
Yeah, I've been willing to attend the future. Unfortunately, I missed the two this last year. There was a county one also, and because I'm on the trustees for the Historical Museum, and I was able to do that one, but I missed the two city ones that came up. But yes, I'd be glad to do that. And I've done it in the past years ago when they came about. And I know things change, and we should be looking at every year when those meetings come up.
Okay, great. Well, again, I want to thank you for your past service and your continued interest. And lastly, is there anything that you would like to add about your interest in the HPC?
Well, nothing really other than I still, even if I wasn't appointed, I'd still be part of it because I'm still interested in historic preservation, whether I'm on the commission or not. But I would really like to stay on the commission. It's a good working group, and I think I can provide a lot of good help to the community as far as historic preservation issues.
Okay, great. Anything from my colleagues? Any follow-up questions or anything? Mirta.
Thanks, Jordan. Jim, it's great to see you. I just wanted to thank Jim for the many, many years of dedication and service, and for the many ways in which he helps keep downtown as beautiful as it is. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we will finalize everything at the next regularly scheduled city council meeting, which is next Monday. So you should be hearing back from us sometime early next week.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Yeah. Bye now.
Yep. Bye. Okay, so our next applicant is Steve Adler. Mr. Adler is not available to interview today. We have a time slot scheduled, but we need to, we'll end up recessing. I wanted to take everyone's temperature. It is within our purview to interview or to appoint him without an interview, since he's served some, I mean, he's been reappointed a number of times. I guess if I wanted to see how comfortable people were with that. Julie.
I'd be happy to make a motion to reappoint Mr. Adler without going through the interview process. He's demonstrated his commitment to the Historic Preservation Commission, and just from my personal conversations with him, he is a great asset to the commission. So I would so move.
Okay, if it would be okay, I'd like to do all the motions at the end. So if you don't mind, if that's okay with you, okay, great. But I appreciate the perspective on that. Amber, did you want to add?
Oh, I was just going to say that I'm comfortable with that as well.
Okay. Sounds good. So we can, again, recess until our next interview is scheduled at 2 o'clock. So let's just be back a couple minutes before 2, and we can interview Patrick Stewart at that time.
What do you mean? But the speaker just turned on.
Okay, we can go ahead and get started again. I believe our next applicant is here, but I think I'm having a technical difficulty. I see that there's one attendee, but I don't see anyone listed. Amanda, are you able to see anyone and admit them as host?
I am experiencing the same problem on this computer. Give me a second to go to the chambers and see if I can fix it there.
Thanks.
All right, Jordan, I'm showing the same thing on both computers I'm using. An attendee is listed, but nobody's there. So we're wondering if maybe somebody joined and then left again.
Okay. Patrick, I don't know if you can hear us, if you are or were in the meeting. If you are able to hear us, if you could try maybe leaving the meeting and rejoining, that might work for us. Okay, so now I see 0 attendees, so hopefully that'll work. Looks like we're having the same issue. Patrick, I think if you don't mind just joining by phone, I think I can send you an invite to the phone number you listed in your application, and maybe we can try that. If you just bear with me for just a moment. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, let me shut off the computer. I'm getting some feedback here. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
No, it's no trouble at all. It's maybe the county is just too used to using Teams. maybe that's.
I think that is the case. We did not have Zoom downloaded, so we were using Zoom online, and I was able to see and hear everybody, but for some reason it wasn't connecting to our webcam or audio.
Oh, okay. Well, great. Well, thanks for bearing with us with the phone interview. I appreciate that. So I don't know if you still see us or not, but I'll just introduce myself. I'm Jordan Hess. I'm chair of the Land Use and Planning Committee, and we have the rest of the committee here as well. We have a pretty informal interview today. We have about 9 questions, and if you're ready to go, we can just jump right into them.
Yep, sounds great. Thank you for having me today.
Great, thank you. So first, if you just start by introducing yourself, please, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what useful experience, knowledge, or perspective you would bring to the commission.
Sure. So my name is Patrick Swart. I work for the Missoula County Clerk and Recorder's Office, overseeing public property records and the state vital record here for the county and contributing to those efforts. From an educational background, I have an undergraduate degree and graduate degree in history, where I focused more specifically on U.S. history in the late 19th and early 20th century, with an emphasis in the history of agriculture, the environment, and technology. I believe that my expertise in history would be a valuable contribution to this commission for a number of reasons. One being that I think historic preservation, and rightfully so, I should qualify this, is dominated by people from like architectural backgrounds in engineering and archaeology, and they bring a useful technical skill set that is vital to a successful historic preservation program. I do think that there is a lack of traditionally trained historians in this field, and I see this as an excellent opportunity to come in with this skill set of kind of classic skill set of research writing and interpretation that would really introduce some human stories and some cultural context to the work that's being done on the commission.
Great, thank you. Number 2 is what is the purpose of historic preservation, and how can the Historic Preservation Commission contribute to our city?
Pardon me, you broke up a little bit there at the start of the question. Would you mind stating that again?
Yep, sure. So what is the purpose of historic preservation, and how can the Historic Preservation Commission contribute to our city?
Sure. So I see the purpose of historic preservation as kind of this identifying the important historical and cultural resources that are vital parts of the community. I think Missoula in particular has such a rich history, and a lot of the reasons why people want to move to Missoula and live and build a life in Missoula is because of its rich history and heritage. The role that historic preservation plays in that process is really seeking out the structures and places that have meaning to our community's past. And the ways in which I see the commission contributing to those efforts, well, I think some concrete examples would be the passage of the adaptive reuse zoning overlay from last year. I think is a great opportunity that incentivizes property owners to maintain historic buildings and kind of reduces some traditional barriers that kind of traditional zoning may have or may disincentivize the preservation of existing structures. 2, I see the commission's kind of role in public outreach and education as being very beneficial to the community. I think that especially as support for the downtown tours is shown, members of Missoula are really interested in the past, in our community's past. And I think that the commission is a great platform to further engage members of the community with these great stories that I think are yet to be told about Missoula. And yeah, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit on there, but yeah.
Oh, that's great, thanks. How do you see the relationship between historic preservation and economic development?
Sure. So I think that there often is this misconception that historic preservation and new development are counterintuitive efforts. I don't necessarily know that that is the case. Like I mentioned before, a lot of what I see attracts people to live and work in Missoula is the rich history that this area has. And a lot of that is tied to the physical structures and historic places around Missoula. If we don't preserve those, I think that that's a major attractor lost as far as economic development goes. Two, I don't see historic preservation, like I said, as this barrier to new development. I see it as beneficial, especially with things like the adaptive reuse overlay, kind of creating new opportunities for property owners to kind of address the needs of the community and to maintain historic structures all at the same time.
Great. Next question is, what is your understanding of the role of the national role, excuse me, what is your understanding of the role the National Register of Historic Places plays on the local level? Is this adequate, and what role should it play?
Yeah, so my understanding is that it provides some protections against, I guess, unfettered destruction of historically significant properties. I think that local jurisdictions have significantly more power to determine what happens to the local structures, to local historic resources as opposed to the federal level. But I do think it is an effective tool. Having those properties listed on the National Register of Historic Places, I think, one, it will allow us, at least at the local level, to require things like historic preservation permits when property owners are looking to make any major adjustments to this property that may affect its historical integrity and cultural integrity as a resource for the community. So I do think it is effective.
Okay, thanks. Next question is, do you have any recommendations about Missoula's historic preservation ordinance? And do you have any suggestions regarding the duties, responsibilities, or structure of the commission itself?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit again there. Would you mind repeating the first part of that question?
Not at all. Do you have any recommendations about Missoula's historic preservation ordinance? And do you have any suggestions regarding the duty, responsibilities, or structure of the commission itself?
Sure. As far as the current historic preservation ordinance, I think Missoula is pretty ahead of the curve as far as national conversations of historic preservation go. My understanding is that historic preservation has really, as a profession, has really been pushing for two things over the last few years. One being the incorporation of historic preservation language into city growth plans and city master plans, as well as the establishment of historic preservation and like the adaptive reuse overlay that's been implemented in Missoula. So I think great things are being done there. I also think great things are being done as far as the public outreach with the historic downtown tours. I think that there is opportunity to expand upon, especially the public outreach. Like I mentioned before, it seems like there's a strong community interest in local history. And I think that the board is uniquely positioned where it has the potential to collaborate with local records, repositories, and other historical institutions around Missoula to really bolster our public engagement efforts. And that's one place in which I think I could really contribute to this board. I've worked for the University of Montana Archives and Special Collections, for the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula, my experience doing some historical research here for the Clerk and Recorder's Office, and facilitating some relationships between these institutions as I've worked at them. I think that the board, the commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, could benefit from that as well. Just more collaboration with local historical institutions to really kind of make history public.
Thanks. The Historic Preservation Officer position at the City of Missoula is recently vacated, and the city is going to be filling that position. Are there any suggestions you have for that position, or any qualities in an applicant that you think would be important moving forward?
Yeah, I think that position, well, you know, and I can't say that I necessarily know the ins and outs of that position and the duties that they fulfill. I understand that they work closely with the commission, but I believe somebody with a strong background in historic preservation and understands the complex components that go into that, like we spoke about earlier, it's a broad field. I mean, it's required expertise in architectural history, in engineering, in traditional history and archaeology are all components that play into this. So somebody that's, I think, well connected in the community, has connections in all of these diverse areas and backgrounds, and is willing to collaborate with the people necessary to bolster an effective historic preservation program.
Thanks. The Historic Preservation Commission has two functions which can often seem at odds with one another. On one hand, the commission promotes Missoula's historic resources and advocates for historic preservation. On the other hand, the commission must objectively review demolition and development permit requests. Can you describe this tension and how would you approach these objectives?
Sure. So, like I was saying before, historic preservation, there is that tension there. And that's where I think that historic preservation is very much the targeted approach to preserving the resources that matter. And I think that involves not only identifying buildings' architectural significance, but looking beyond that to explore its broader, kind of the human stories that are tied to that and the broader cultural significance that has played in this community's history. So as you're reviewing demolition permit requests, I think that definitely needs to come into play, understanding the broader historical significance before deciding whether or not to approve or deny that, because new development is an essential part of community growth and development. I think, especially as we're facing new challenges with population growth and rising home prices and limited housing stock, new development is inevitable, and historic preservation needs to find, I think the commission needs to find that balance between preserving the buildings that matter and identifying ones that maybe don't meet that same level of historical and cultural significance for the community.
Okay. Thanks. The Historic Preservation Commission meets on the first Thursday of each month at 6 p.m. in the City Council chambers or on Zoom right now. The commission has struggled with attendance in the past. Does your schedule generally accommodate this meeting time and allow for time to review staff reports and other materials prior to the meeting?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. Lastly, the city offers board training twice a year. This training covers good governance, open meetings, public participation and right to know, ethics, conflicts of interest, bylaws, minutes, and parliamentary procedures. The City Council feels it's very important that all city board members attend this training. Have you attended or would you be willing to attend the training in the future?
Definitely. This is a new experience for me. I don't have prior board experience, but as a young professional, I see this as a good opportunity to use my skill set to give back to the community, and I would definitely be interested in taking that training.
Okay, great. Well, that's the conclusion of our formal questions. Is there anything that you would like to add about your interest?
Sure. I guess what I really want to highlight is, and I guess I did make this point earlier, but I do believe that traditional historical voices should matter in these conversations. And I think that I really have that expertise in historical research, writing, and analysis that can contribute to this board in a meaningful way. Maybe it would be, I believe, a new and diverse perspective that would hopefully contribute to the conversations that are already being had about historic preservation.
Great. Well, thank you. Any of my colleagues, does anyone have any follow-up questions? Okay, so Patrick, our process from here forward is we have interviews today, and then the full council will make will make the appointments on next Monday, the 14th. So you'll hear back from us sometime early next week.
Great.
We really appreciate your interest, and we'll be back in touch shortly.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, we have one more interview scheduled for 2:20, I believe, and that person's not here yet. So again, we can just recess until our next applicant arrives, but please don't go far. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started here again. All right. Okay, Leif Fredrickson, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a few minutes to figure it out.
No, that's okay. Not a problem. We're just going to have folks filtering back in here. I'll go ahead and introduce myself and the process here, and then we can get started. So my name is Jordan Hess. I'm the chair of the Land Use and Planning Committee of the City Council, as you know, we're doing interviews today for the Historic Preservation Commission. The commission has actually currently quite a few vacancies that we were unable to fill earlier because of COVID. And so we actually have 6 vacancies, and we have 5 applicants today. So we're going to be filling as many seats as we can, and then we'll be likely re-advertising and seeking additional applicants in the future. But again, I really appreciate your interest, and if you're ready, we can go ahead and run through the questions.
Sounds great. I'm ready.
Okay. So I guess first of all, please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what useful experience, knowledge, or perspective you would bring to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Okay, yeah, I'm a history instructor at the University of Montana. I got my PhD in history a couple of years ago at the University of Virginia, and I'm from Missoula originally, and wanted to move back here. So we moved back, and I've been teaching history at the university. I teach Western history, environmental history, public history, which has a lot of overlap with historic preservation. In addition to that, I do a lot of contract historical research work. One of my jobs right now is curating oral histories of current and former members of the EPA for another organization, and developing a public history website based on that. And I've worked with Unseen Missoula downtown tours, giving tours, helping them develop tours, and a number of other sort of contract historical work. So yeah, I'm happy to go into more detail about anything, but that's just a general overview there.
Okay, great, thanks. In your opinion, what is the purpose of historic preservation, and how can the Historic Preservation Commission contribute to our city?
Well, I think historic preservation is about, preserving broadly speaking, the heritage of a place. And, the way that a lot of that focuses on preserving buildings and that sort of thing. But I think more broadly speaking, it's a way of, trying to preserve that whole heritage and make it accessible to people that are living in that place and people that are visiting as well. So a large part of it is the preservation of these buildings, which is not something I know. I'm not an architect, and I'm not deeply steeped in a lot of the laws that have to do with that. But the other part of that, I guess, is sort of the interpretation of the past and making history kind of come alive for people, making it relevant for people, and so on. So that's the part of historic preservation that I think my background speaks to, and is part that I'd be very interested in helping with for Missoula.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, how do you see the relationship between historic preservation and economic development?
Well, I think historic preservation has a really strong role to play in bringing people to a place like Missoula. There's a lot of interest in the heritage of places, and it really, I think Missoula has focused a lot on sort of the environmental quality of life, but there's a lot in the built environment and the history of the city that can be developed too, and make accessible and attractive to people that are coming here, and to people that live here as well. I think, having given the downtown tours, a lot of people that come on those are people that are from Missoula, and so it gets people downtown, and when they're downtown, they can shop and so on and so forth. So I think it has developing that sense of place is really important to, tourism, but also just people that want to move to places like Missoula. And increasingly now people can do their jobs from wherever. And so, sort of continuing to build out Missoula's kind of attractiveness as a place. I think that historic preservation has a part in that as well.
Okay, thanks. What's your understanding of the role the National Register of Historic Places plays on the local level? Is this adequate, and what role should it play?
That's a good question. I don't know a ton about the National Register of Historic Places in terms of the sort of detailed policy aspects of it. I think that in general, so that would be something I would be, happy to develop in terms of my knowledge of that. But it's, I think in general, I would say that is part of a historic preservation approach that, again, has focused a lot on, preserving particular aspects of buildings and so on, which is important, but I would say it's not the whole aspect of historic preservation more broadly. So I would want to, I guess, probably build in a little more broader understanding of historic preservation than has sometimes been part of the National Registry of Historic Places model.
Okay, thanks. Do you have any recommendations about Missoula's historic preservation ordinance? And do you have any suggestions regarding the duties, responsibilities, or structure of the commission itself?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't know the detailed aspects of the law there. I mean, I'd be happy to dig into the details of it, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know about that.
No problem. The next question is, the city's historic preservation officer recently left for another opportunity, and will be filling that position in the near future. Can you describe anything that you think is particularly important in that position, and in the qualities and characteristics of the person that would hold that position?
Yeah, I mean, I think that having just like a passion for local history is probably the most important thing there. I think that having somebody who does have a good background in the legal aspects of it is really important, but at the same time, somebody who again has kind of a broad-minded approach to historic preservation that would consider a lot of interpretive aspects of historic preservation, and consider how historic preservation connects with other aspects of Missoula's development, economic development, as we mentioned before. Potentially things like affordable housing or something like that. To try to not make it sort of this siloed thing, but something that's really interacting with other things that are going on in the city.
Okay, great. The Historic Preservation Commission has two functions which can often seem at odds with one another. On one hand, the commission promotes Missoula's historic resources and advocates for historic preservation. On the other hand, the commission must objectively review demolition and development permit requests. Can you describe this tension, and how would you approach these two competing objectives?
Can you repeat that tension again?
Yeah, so on one hand, the commission promotes Missoula's historic resources and advocates for historic preservation and plays an advocacy role. On the other hand, the commission plays a quasi-judicial role of approving or of reviewing requests for demolition permits. And so, being objectively applying the regulations of the demolition permit process versus advocating for historic preservation, and so that's the tension that we're asking about in this question.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a tension there, and I think that as part of historic preservation, you can't preserve everything, and there are ways in which their trade-offs have to be considered, and the context of what else is going on in the city has to be considered. And I think that a big part of dealing with that tension is to not just deal with it internally, but to get ample public feedback on those sorts of things, to kind of help let Missoula residents get a sense of some feeling of input into the process as well, so that when those choices have to be made, there's an understanding of that there is that tension among other residents as well, and a sense of them having some ownership of the decisions that get made.
Okay, thanks. The Historic Preservation Commission meets on the first Thursday of each month at 6 p.m. Virtually right now, but typically in the City Council chambers. The commission has struggled with attendance in the past. Would your schedule generally accommodate this meeting time, and do you generally have time to review staff reports and other materials prior to the meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Lastly, the City of Missoula offers board training twice a year. This training covers good governance, open meetings, public participation and right to know, ethics, conflicts of interest, bylaws, minutes, and parliamentary procedures. The City Council feels it's very important for city board members to attend this training. Have you attended, or would you be willing to attend in the future?
I haven't attended, but I'd be willing to attend. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, that's all that we have as far as formal questions. I guess first, do any committee members have follow-ups? Brian.
Not a follow-up, really, just a shameless plug for Mr. Fredrickson's podcast that he collaborative with others in the community on, Death in the West. It is fantastic and a real treasure for the community and the state and the country. So shameless plug for you. Thanks for working on that.
And I have to say that's in my queue on a recommendation from someone recently. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks.
Julie.
I just want to say, go Cavaliers. I grew up near Charlottesville. So.
Oh, really? Oh, nice. Yeah, we spent quite a chunk of time there. It's a great place.
All right. So that's all we have as far as questions on our end. Is there anything you want to add or any questions you have for us?
No, I mean, I guess, well, I have one question. Where do you guys see sort of, or where are you, I mean, probably have different opinions on this, but in terms of where you see kind of historic preservation going, or where would you like to see it going in the city? If anybody's interested in answering that.
That's a great question. I think we have a really good foundation right now. I think that we, in the last several years, our historic preservation commissioner, who recently left for another opportunity, did tremendous work, and along with Gwen Jones on council and several others, rewrote our historic preservation ordinance. So I think the ordinance just works a lot better now, and so I think we have a good base moving forward. We have a new zoning tool that's an adaptive reuse zoning overlay that makes it easier to do adaptive reuse projects. And I think we were the first, or I think we were one of the first in the country to have that tool. So kind of on the cutting edge there. So I think the house is in order now, and I think there's really just a lot of implementation I think that the real or perceived tension between housing affordability and historic preservation is something that we need to figure out. How to do preservation in a way that doesn't drive up our already high housing costs. So that was a little bit of a. Now I'll leave it at that for now. And Brian, it looks like Brian and then Gwen.
Yeah, so we plugged the podcast, and then you have to ask a question like that. You're gonna get a ton of different perspectives on it. I think Jordan's comments are on the mark. What I will say is, it's a bit of a simplification. We make better decisions as a body with better data and information and context, and so we've been, we had a great HBO in Emmy. It's going to be really important to fill that position with another, really excellent HBO. And the better that, boards like this board tease out the various aspects of the kind of tensions that we're talking about, the better for everybody, the better for us as decision makers on land use and development, pressures. And I think the better the community is served. And the last thing I'll say is, one thing that influences me personally is, for a number of years, I have felt there's a lot of sort of optimism and excitement in the community pre-pandemic around, some change, but change is also incredibly dislocating to folks, and how we manage that change and growth while being empathetic, among other things, to the dislocating qualities of it. I think that's part of the challenge.
Yeah.
Gwen, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks for coming in today and interviewing. I appreciate it. And yeah, I think it's actually an exciting time for historic preservation in Missoula. the Merc was a watershed event that was very painful for this community, but the upside of it was that people are far more engaged in historic preservation now, and the historic tours downtown and around town are incredibly popular, as you said, with a lot of native Missoulians. So that is something that needs to be capitalized on. And my impression is that, as usual, Missoula in Montana, we have less resources than you would find in a big urban area to go towards historic preservation. So we have to be creative, and we have to figure out how to use the market to make it work, because there's not going to be a lot of subsidies out there. So Emmy did a lot of good work in that area with the adaptive reuse zoning and this kind of thing. There is an architect out of Billings that is very well versed in historic tax credits. And I think we need to be doing a lot more of that in Missoula. And my understanding is it kind of takes the right person with the right set of skills to champion something like that. You need to have a good knowledge base to plug in and make that work. But I'm hoping we get that in Missoula at some point in time with the right person. And also, I'm just going to put a plug in, since we're plugging today. The MCPS admin building is kind of on the cusp right now, and hope people are paying attention. And the school district has to figure out within their mission how they can make that work in terms of historic preservation. There's some complicated layers there, but I think it's a beautiful building in a great location that's very densely built. So how can we use that? So I'm just going to put that on your plate, and I know you're going to handle it. Thanks.
Great. Okay, well, I have to move us along to keep us on schedule, but really appreciate your interest. And process from here is that we will have a council deliberation, and we're in a position of having highly qualified applicants and plenty of seats. So I think the odds are in your favor here, but we'll have a discussion. And then everything will be finalized at our council meeting next Monday, and we'll be back in touch. So.
All right. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a great afternoon. All right. I keep clicking the leave meeting button almost when I after each of these, and I haven't actually left yet. I catch myself in time, but okay. So we've had our interviews. I would entertain a motion today to move forward, and then we can re-advertise for the other positions. Julie.
Looks like I beat Amber to the punch there. I would make a motion that we accept all of these candidates. They all have great things to offer the commission, and it's, as always, glad to see the interest of people to volunteer their time to work for our city.
Great, thank you. That motion is in order. Amber?
Yeah, I agree with what Julie said. I also think this is a nice combination of people, because they're coming at historic preservation from different perspectives. So I'm happy with the pool of candidates we have. I'll be happy to support all of them.
Great, thanks. I'll just echo that myself. I think it's really great to have the diversity of candidates, a range of reapplications and new, that bring good experience and institutional knowledge, and then also new fresh voices and new perspectives. So one thing that I intend to get sorted out between now and Monday, the Historic Preservation Commission does have roles, professional roles, at-large roles, alternates. And so I believe everyone will fit in a tidy manner into those roles, but I will just verify that before Monday. And I don't see any reason why we can't vote now, but we'll just make sure that we, if Julie, if it's okay with you, I'll just take that kind of as the intent of the motion, that we can put people into the appropriate positions, and I'll report back on that on Monday.
Absolutely. And if perhaps there is somehow not a fit with those roles that are defined, is there any way we can make an exception if need be to make sure that we have a place for all of these candidates?
I believe so. And if, I mean, it might be a case of someone needing to be in an alternate position or something like that, but I really don't see a problem. I mean, just they're pretty broad catch-all categories, and we have a number of people that come with professional perspectives in a variety of fields. So, well,
thanks. Yep.
Okay, great. There's no public here for comment, so we can go ahead and have a roll call vote on the motion.
All right, I have Anderson as absent. Next would be Becerra.
Yes.
Contos.
Yes.
Hess.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Merritt.
Yes.
Ramos.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Vasika.
Yes.
Von Lossberg.
Sorry. Yes.
No problem. And Heidi West.
Yes.
All right, I have 10 yeses, 0 no's, 0 abstain, and 2 absent.
Great. Thank you. The motion passes, and that'll go on our consent agenda. We don't have any further business, so we can be adjourned. Thanks, everyone.